For people of faith, the reason why they try to do good, and when they do it, is because their faith motivates them to do so. And that is genuinely the proper face of faith.
We don't require divine permission to know right from wrong. We don't need tablets administered to us, 10 at a time in tablet form, on pain of death, to be able to have a moral argument. No.
Anything of the sort. Forget all that and follow me is moral only on one condition, and it's the condition I referred to before, that the world is about to come to an end, and that only those who stick by me, a familiar trope from deluded prophets throughout the ages, are going to get out of it. Again, I would say a multiply wicked thing to be saying and offer to be making. We would be so much better off without this cult. We would think so much more clearly about the real moral questions than not.
I have a text, and it is from, because I won't take a religious text from a known extremist or fanatic, it's from Cardinal Newman. Recently, Prime Minister Blair's urging, beatified on his way to canonization, a man whose apologia made many Anglicans reconsider their fealty and made many people join the Roman Catholic Church, and is considered, I think rightly, a great Christian thinker. My text from the apologia. The Catholic Church, said Newman, holds it better for the sun and moon to drop from heaven, for the earth to fail, and for all the many millions on it to die in extremest agony, than that one soul, I will not say will be lost, but should commit one venial sin, should tell one willful untruth, or should steal one farthing without excuse. You'll have to say it's beautifully phrased, ladies and gentlemen. But to me, and here's my proposition, what we have here, and picked from no mean source, is a distillation of precisely what is twisted and immoral in the faith mentality. Its essential fanaticism, its consideration of the human being as raw material, and its fantasy of purity. Once you assume a creator and a plan, it makes us objects in a cruel experiment whereby we are created sick and commanded to be well. I'll repeat that. Created sick and then ordered to be well. And over us to supervise this is installed a celestial dictatorship, a kind of divine North Korea. Greedy for uncritical praise from dawn till dusk, and swift to punish the original sins with which it so tenderly gifted us in the very first place. However, let no one say there's no cure. Salvation is offered. Redemption, indeed, is promised at the low price of the surrender of your critical faculties. Religion, it might be said, must be said, would have to admit, makes extraordinary claims, but though I would maintain that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, rather daringly provides not even ordinary evidence for its extraordinary supernatural claims. Therefore, we might begin by asking, and I'm asking my opponent as well as you when you consider your voting, is it good for the world to appeal to our credulity and not to our skepticism? Is it good for the world to worship a deity that takes sides in wars and human affairs? To appeal to our fear and to our guilt, is it good for the world? To our terror of death, is it good to appeal? To preach guilt and shame about the sexual act and the sexual relationship, is this good for the world? And asking yourself the while, are these really religious responsibilities, as I maintain they are? To terrify children with the image of hell and eternal punishment, not just of themselves, but of their parents and those they love. Perhaps worst of all, to consider women an inferior creation. Is that good for the world? And can you name me a religion that has not done that? To insist that we are created and not evolved in the face of all the evidence. Religion forces nice people to do unkind things, and also makes intelligent people say stupid things. Handed a small baby for the first time, is it your first reaction to think, beautiful, almost perfect, now please hand me the sharp stone for its genitalia that I may do the work of the Lord? No. It is very self-evident in our material world. Let me ask Tony again. Everyone in the civilized world has roughly agreed, including the majority of Arabs and Jews and the international community, that there should be enough room for two states, for two peoples in the same land. I think we have a rough agreement on that. Why can't we get it? The UN can't get it. The US can't get it. The Quartet can't get it. The PLO can't get it. The Israeli parliament can't get it. Why can't they get it? Because the parties of God have a veto on it, and everybody knows that this is true. Because of the divine promises made about this territory, there will never be peace, there will never be compromise. There will instead be misery, shame, and tyranny, and people will kill each other's children for ancient books and caves and relics. And who is going to say that this is good for the world? And that's just the example nearest to hand. Have you looked lately at the possibility that we used to discuss as children in fear? What will happen when messianic fanatics get hold of an apocalyptic weapon? Well, we're about to find that out as we watch the Islamic Republic of Iran and its party of God allies make a dress rehearsal for precisely this. Have you looked lately at the teaching in Africa and the consequences of it, of a church that says AIDS may be wicked, but not as wicked as condoms? That's exactly no seconds left, ladies and gentlemen. I've done my best. Believe me, I have more.
The idea that humans are born flawed comes from verses like Romans 5:12. That builds guilt into people from the start. Psychology shows behavior comes from biology and environment, not inherited sin. There's also no scientific evidence for a creator or divine plan. Evolution explains human development through genetics and fossil records. And when belief overrides evidence, real harm follows. Opposition to condoms during the AIDS crisis increased infections, and religious claims continue to fuel conflict in places like the Middle East.
Christopher, thank you for starting our debate. Mr. Blair, your opening remarks, please.
Let me first of all say that I do not regard the leader of North Korea as a religious icon. You will be delighted to know. It is undoubtedly true that people commit horrific acts of evil in the name of religion. It is also undoubtedly true that people do acts of extraordinary common good inspired by religion. Almost half of healthcare in Africa is delivered by faith-based organizations, saving millions of lives. A quarter of worldwide HIV/AIDS care is provided by Catholic organizations. There is the fantastic work of Muslim and Jewish relief organizations. There are in Canada thousands of religious organizations that care for the mentally ill or disabled or disadvantaged or destitute. So the proposition that religion is unadulterated poison is unsustainable. It can be destructive. It can also create a deep well of compassion, and frequently does. People are inspired to do such good by what I would say is the true essence of faith, which is, along with doctrine and ritual particular to each faith, a basic belief common to all faiths in serving and loving God through serving and loving your fellow human beings. And the values derived from this essence offer to many people a benign, positive, and progressive framework by which to live our daily lives, stimulating the impulse to do good, disciplining the propensity to be selfish and bad. And faith, defined in this way, is not simply faith as solace in times of need, though it can be, nor a relic of unthinking tradition, still less a piece of superstition or an explanation of biology. Instead, it answers a profound spiritual yearning, something we feel and sense instinctively. This is a spiritual presence, bigger, more important, more meaningful than just us alone, that has its own power separate from our power, and that even as the world's marvels multiply, makes us kneel in humility, not swagger in pride. And that if faith is seen in this way, science and religion are not incompatible, destined to fight each other until eventually the cool reason of science extinguishes the fanatical flames of religion. Rather, science educates us as to how the physical world is and how it functions, and faith educates us as to the purpose to which such knowledge is put, the values that should guide its use, and the limits of what science and technology can do, not to make our lives materially richer, but rather richer in spirit. And so, imagine indeed a world without religious faith. Not just no place of worship, no prayer, no scripture, but no men or women who, because of their faith, dedicating their lives to others, showing forgiveness where otherwise they wouldn't, believing through their faith that even the weakest and most powerless have rights, and they have a duty to defend them. And yes, I agree, in a world without religion, the religious fanatics may be gone. But I ask you, would fanaticism be gone? And then realize that such an imagined vision of a world without religion is not in fact new. The 20th century was a century scarred by visions that had precisely that imagining in their vision and at their heart, and gave us Hitler and Stalin and Pol Pot. In this vision, obedience to the will of God was for the weak. It was the will of man that should dominate. I know very well that you can point, and quite rightly Christopher does, to examples of where people have used religion to do things that are terrible and that have made the world a worse place. But I ask you not to judge all people of religious faith by those people any more than we would judge politics by bad politicians. Or, indeed, journalists by bad journalists. The question is, along with all the things that are wrong with religion, is there also something within it that helps the world to be better and people to do good? And I would submit there is. Thank you.
So, Christopher, it's now your opportunity in our first of two rebuttal rounds to respond to Mr. Blair.
Well, now, in fairness, no one was arguing that religion should or will die out of the world. And all I'm arguing is that it'd be better if there was a great deal more by way of an outbreak of secularism. And I knew it would come up, that we'd be told about charity. And I take this very seriously. Because we know, ladies and gentlemen, as it happens, we're the first generation of people who do really, what the cure for poverty really is. It eluded people for a long, long time. The cure for poverty has a name, in fact. It's called the empowerment of women. Try it in Bangladesh, try it in Bolivia. It works all the time. Name me one religion that stands for that, or ever has. Wherever you look in the world and you try to remove the shackles of ignorance and disease and stupidity from women, it is invariably the clerisy that stands in the way. Or in the case of... Now, furthermore, if you're going to grant this to Catholic charities, say, which I would hope are doing a lot of work in Africa, if I was a member of a church that had preached that AIDS was not as bad as condoms, I'd be putting some conscience money into Africa too, I must say. But it won't bring... I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be funny. If I was trying to be funny, you mistook me. It won't bring back the millions of people who've died wretched deaths because of that teaching. That still goes on. I'd like to hear a word of apology from the religious about that, if it was on offer. Do we grant to Hamas and to Hezbollah, both of whom will tell you and incessantly do, look at our charitable work. Without us, Effendi, the poor of Gaza, the poor of Lebanon, where would they be but for our... And they're right. They do a great deal of charitable work. It's nothing compared to the harm that they do, but it's a great deal of work all the same. We don't require divine permission to know right from wrong. We don't need tablets administered to us 10 at a time in tablet form, on pain of death, to be able to have a moral argument. No, we have... We have the reasoning and the moral suasion of Socrates and of our own abilities. We don't need dictatorship to give us right from wrong, and that's my lot. Thank you.
Helping people doesn't require religion. The strongest evidence for reducing poverty is education and empowering women. This has been proven in places like Bangladesh and Bolivia through economic data and development programs. Religion has historically resisted that. In many regions, religious institutions opposed women's education, birth control, and independence. Even the charity argument falls apart when you look deeper. Religious groups often create the problems they later try to fix. The Catholic Church's stance against condoms during the AIDS crisis contributed to millions of preventable infections and deaths. That's documented by global health organizations. And morality itself doesn't come from religion. We had ethical reasoning long before organized religion shaped laws. Philosophers like Socrates built moral systems based on reason, not divine commands.
I don't think we should think that because you can point to examples of prejudice in the name of religion, that bigotry and prejudice and wrongdoing are wholly owned subsidiaries of religion. Right? There are plenty of examples of prejudice against women, against gay people, against others, right, that come from outside the world of religion. And the claim that I make is not that everything the church has done in Africa is right, but let me tell you one thing it did do, and it did it whilst I was Prime Minister of the UK. The churches together formed a campaign for the cancellation of debt. They came together, they succeeded, and the first beneficiaries of the cancellation of debt were young girls going to school in Africa because for the first time they had free primary education. So I agree that not everything the church or the religious communities have done around the world is right, but I do say, at least accept, that there are people doing great work day in, day out, who genuinely are not prejudiced or bigoted, but are working with people who are afflicted by famine and disease and poverty, and they are doing it inspired by their faith. And of course it's the case that not everybody... Of course it's the case that you do not have to be a person of faith in order to do good work. I've never claimed that. I would never claim that. You know, I know lots of people, many, many people, who are people not of faith at all, but who do fantastic and decent work for their communities and for the world. My claim is just very simple. There are nonetheless people who are inspired by their faith to do good. If we can't drive religion out of the world, because many people of faith believe it and believe it very deeply, let's at least see how we do make religion a force for good, how we do encourage those people of faith who are trying to do good, and how we unite those against those who want to pervert religion and turn it into a badge of identity used in opposition to others.
Well, how splendidly you notice we progress, ladies and gentlemen. Now it's okay, some religious people are sort of all right. I think I seem to be bargaining one of the greater statesmen of the recent past down a bit. Not necessarily opposed to that. I'm intrigued now. So religion could be a good thing after all. Sometimes we think. It's now the proposition. What would a religion have to do to get that far? Well, I think it would have to give up all supernatural claims. It would have to say, please, it would have to say, no, you are not to do this under the threat of reward, heaven, or the terror of punishment, hell. No, we can't offer you miracles. Find me the church that will say, forget all that. Faith healing, no. It would have to give that up. It would have to give up the idea of an eternal, unalterable authority figure who was judge, jury, and executioner against whom there could be no appeal, and who wasn't finished with you even when you died. That's quite a lot for religion to give up, don't you think? But who would not say it would be better off without it, if it was what Tony Blair would like it to be? An aspect of humanism, an aspect of compassion, an aspect of the realizations of human solidarity, the knowledge that we are in fact all bound up one with another, that we have responsibilities to one to another, and that, as I do when I give blood, partly because I don't lose the pint forever, I can always get it back, but that there's actually a sense of pleasure to be had in helping your fellow creature. I think that should be enough. Thank you.
If religion were truly good, it wouldn't need to be reformed or guided to behave better. Hitchens exposes that clearly. For religion to actually work in a positive way, it would have to drop its core claims: heaven, hell, miracles, divine authority. But once you remove those, what's left is just human values. And that's the point. Compassion, charity, and cooperation already exist without religion. Neuroscience shows humans are wired for empathy through brain systems like mirror neurons. Social behavior and cooperation are explained by evolution and survival, not divine instruction. Religion doesn't create morality. It takes credit for it. And when Blair talks about good believers, he's admitting something important. The good actions come from the person, not the belief system, because the same system can justify both helping people and harming them. So the question becomes simple. If the good parts come from humans and the harmful parts come from doctrine, why keep the doctrine at all?
It all depends, I guess, what your experience of religious people is. When we look back in history, yes, of course, you can see plenty of examples of where religion has played a negative role. You can see great examples, for example, in the abolition of slavery, where religious reformers joined with secular reformers in order to bring about the abolition of slavery. And let's get away from this idea that religion created poverty. You know, there are bad things that have happened in the world outside of religion, right? And when you look at the 20th century, and you see the great scars of political ideology around views that had absolutely dramatically at their heart fascism, the communism of Stalin. Absolutely at their heart was the eradication of religion. Then what I would say to you is, get rid of religion, but you're not going to get rid of fanaticism, and you're not going to get rid of the wrong in the world. So the question is, how then do we make sense of religion having this vital part in the world today, since it is growing and not diminishing? How do we make sense of this? And this is where, yes, there is an obligation on the people of faith to try and join across the faith divide with those of other faiths. That's the reason for my foundation. And here's the thing. When they start to talk about their faith, they don't actually talk in terms of heaven and hell and a God that's an executioner of those that do wrong. They talk in terms of their basic feeling that love of God can be expressed best through love of neighbor and actions in furtherance of the compassion and help needed by others. And this is in 2007, religious organizations in the US gave 1.5 times the amount of aid that USAID did. Not insignificant. For people of faith, the reason why they try to do good, and when they do it, is because their faith motivates them to do so. And that is genuinely the proper face of faith.
On to our closing statements. Christopher, you will begin.
Consider yourselves, and consider this carefully, ladies and gentlemen, brothers, sisters, comrades, friends. Are you yourselves willing, for the sake of certain elements of the numinous, perhaps for a great record of good works, as it's proposed by Tony, are you willing to say that you give your allegiance to an ultimate redeemer? Because you're not really religious if you don't believe that there is a divine supervision involved. You don't have to believe it intervenes all the time. If you don't believe that, you're already halfway out the door. You don't need me. But are you willing to pay the price of a permanent supervisor? Are you willing to pay the price of believing in things that are supernatural? Miracles, afterlives, angels. Are you willing to admit, perhaps this most of all, are you willing to admit that human beings can be the interpreter of this divine figure. Because a religion means that you will have to follow someone who is your religious leader. You can't, try as you may, follow Jesus of Nazareth. It can't be done. You can try and do it, it can't be done. You'll have to follow his vicar on earth. You have to say, this person has divine authority. I maintain that that and what goes with it is too much of a sacrifice of the mental and intellectual freedom that is essential to us to be tolerated. And you gain everything by repudiating that and standing up to your own full height. And you gain much more than you will by pretending that you're a member of a flock or in any other way, any kind of sheep. Thank you.
I would say that the question is, for me, with the belief in Jesus Christ, not how that makes me subject to oppression and servitude, but on the contrary, how that helps me find the best way of expressing the best of the human spirit. And it was actually Einstein who was not an atheist, in fact. He believed in a supreme being, although he did not necessarily subscribe to organized religion, who said religion without science is blind. But he also went on to say science without religion is lame. And I would say that, for me, faith is not about certainty. It is in part a reflection, indeed, of my own awareness of my own ignorance. And though life's processes can be explained by science, nonetheless, the meaning and purpose of life cannot be. And in that space, for me at least, lies not certainty in the scientific sense, but a belief that is clear and insistent, and I would say rational, which is that there is a higher power than human power, and that higher power causes us to lead better lives in accordance with a will more important than our own. Not in order that we should be imprisoned by that superior will, but on the contrary, so that we can discipline and use our own will in furtherance of the things that represent the best in human beings and the best in humanity. So I think this debate this evening has been a fascinating and I think deeply important debate about probably the single most important issue of the 21st century. I don't stand before you tonight and say that those of us of religious faith have always done right, since that is plainly wrong. But I do say that throughout human history, there have been examples of people inspired by faith that have actually, rather than contributed to the suppression of humanity, contributed to its liberation, spiritually, emotionally, and even materially. And it is those people that I stand up for here with you tonight. Thank you.
The Bible itself supports slavery. Ephesians 6:5 tells slaves to obey their masters. Leviticus 25:44, Yesmah owning slaves from other nations. Religion didn't end slavery. It had to be corrected by people who went against those teachings. And the idea that atheism caused the worst crimes of the 20th century is misleading. Stalin and Hitler didn't act based on science or skepticism. They built systems that acted like religions. Absolute authority, no questioning, total control. That's the same structure religion uses. Hitchens' point is stronger here. The real danger isn't just belief. It's authority without question. Religion demands that. It asks people to accept leaders as speaking for God. Once you accept that, you give up your independence. You stop thinking for yourself. And history shows exactly where that leads.
Well, sometimes known, by the way, as Pascal's gambit, which is, I think, a suggestive coinage. For those of you who don't know, or who might be watching, of whom this is new, I'll just state it, I hope not too crudely. Blaise Pascal, who was one of the founders of probability theory and a great mathematician and a great Catholic apologist of the 17th century, phrased it like this. He was addressing the people he called those who are so made that they cannot believe. That's me, for example. And he said, well, if you can't believe, think of it like this. If you bet that making the right adjustments to your relationship with God will save you in the future state, and you're right, you win a lot. If you're wrong, what have you lost? What have you got to lose? Now, the reason why I say wager and gambit are appropriate for this is it's obviously a very hucksterish claim, or offer, I mean to say. It's pretty cheap and pretty vulgar, and I would say especially so when offered to people who are dying or ill or frightened or in extremis. I think it's distinctly nasty and sharp practice to try it on them, but I think it's pretty sharp and nasty at any time. And you'll notice that it postulates, and here are its other weaknesses, two things. One, a very cynical and gullible God, who will, if I say to him, tell you what, I'll give up the convictions of a lifetime, fling myself at your feet, pretend I believe, hope you're impressed, would say, yeah, that's good, that's progress. In other words, you get no reward for intellectual consistency, courage, honesty, anything of that sort. And of course, as with all these human-made ideas of divine tribunals, no lawyer to represent you, no appeal, and no opportunity to produce any evidence. I pass over that lightly and say, what does it ask also of the wager? It asks for someone to be a credulous, cringing, unprincipled serf who says, sure, what are principles for if not to be sold in the hope of a future boon? Well, those are the largest, I think, shortcomings of Pascalian, and by implication, all other religious reasoning about the death judgment and the other last things. Thank you.
Dr. Belinsky, what are the strengths of Pascal's wager? Very good.
That from a distinguished mathematician. They still don't.
Would you, Christopher Hitchens, would you agree with the following statement made by Sam Harris? And I quote, "Some propositions are so dangerous that it may even be ethical to kill people for believing them."
You would be idle in dismissing it at the first reading, and obviously Sam has put it at its most blunt. But I'll give you a very practical example of a current theocratic dictatorship. We've all wondered, at least everyone of my age has since they were small, what will happen the day that a really nasty guy gets hold of a really bad weapon? That was how I thought about it when I was 7. I would now say, what happens when a messianic regime lays hold of an apocalyptic weapon? Well, we're about to find out. And the people who have plagiarized the ingredients of this weapon, stolen it from piracy on the high seas, broken every international law, every agreement, every treaty they've ever signed with the UN, the Atomic Energy Authority, the EU, and so forth, are governed by the totalitarian theory called the velayat du faqih, the guardianship of the jurist, the supreme leader. Notice that again, another supreme leader, another divinely inspired dictator whose word cannot be challenged and who wants to bring on the end of days. It's not the least of my dislikes of religion that it has openly or covertly an expressed wish, a clear one, for the end of the world. It doesn't like this world, wants it to finish. People who are in the process of acquiring the secular weaponry with which to bring about genocide deserve, I think, to have their ideology treated as toxic and its characters as dangerous vermin and as, like pirates and terrorists, people who it is lawful to destroy. Yes, so to that extent I'm with Sam, sure.
Dr. Berlinski, you're not a Christian, and indeed you're not religious, as I understand it. Why do you argue for the influence of Christianity or a Judeo-Christian influence in society?
I presume you're not asking that in the hopes of a personal declaration. I mean, I argue for a great many things, and my personal involvement in topics for debate is variable. This particular question strikes me as more important and more demanding of a personal involvement than most. I think the issue is tremendously significant. I think if we're honest about the times in which we live, it's quite right what Matthew Arnold suggested. The sea of faith has been receding under the power of a variety of forces, and the results have, in a certain way, been catastrophic for the human race. I should not say that a secular Jew has a remarkable degree of authority when it comes to discussing these events. After all, I have lived my own life under the impress of the maxim to have a good time all the time. But on the other hand, it doesn't hurt to hear these words from someone such as myself, because at least you are hearing these words for someone with no conceivable bias in their favor. I count myself as an objective observer of the circumstances. So perhaps that's the only reasonable answer I can give. These are important questions. They've had horrific consequences in human history. They continue to have horrific consequences, especially in intellectual history. And in response to why should it be that a secular Jew opens his mouth on questions pertaining to the Christian religion?
10 seconds.
It's a big tent. I'm presuming I will be welcome.
This part exposes how weak the foundation really is. Pascal's wager is basically saying, just believe, just in case. That's not truth. That's fear-based thinking. Real reasoning doesn't work like that. You don't accept claims because you're scared of being wrong. You look for evidence. Believing something just to avoid punishment isn't honesty, it's self-preservation. And look at what it assumes. A God who rewards people for pretending to believe, even if it's fake. That undermines the whole idea of truth and integrity. It encourages people to abandon their principles just to play it safe. Then there's the bigger danger Hitchens points out. When belief systems are tied to absolute authority, they become dangerous in the real world. When leaders claim divine backing, their actions can't be questioned. That's how you get regimes that justify extreme actions with religious certainty.
Thank you.
Christopher Hitchens, what specific teachings of Jesus do you believe to be evil or poisonous?
The concept of vicarious redemption is the most repulsive, I think, and the most central. I mean, I could pick a lot of peripheral utterances of the Nazarene, or alleged utterances of the Nazarene, but the inescapable one, the one that none of his followers troubles to deny that he is the idea that by throwing your sins onto somebody else, onto a scapegoat, you can have them annealed, polished. That is a disgusting and immoral doctrine. If I care for you enough, I can pay your debt, even if you incurred it out of your own stupid irresponsibility. I could, if I wished, and it's been done, offer to take your place in prison, though not many people will allow the exchange, or if you were a hostage. I could do that if I loved you enough, and there are examples of people willing to put themselves forward as the substitute for someone's execution. I suppose Sidney Carton in A Tale of Two Cities is the best-known folkloric one, but you cannot relieve people of their responsibility. And it's immoral to offer to do so, and it would be disgusting if it could be done. So the moral rot of Christianity is, I think, exposed in its central doctrine of vicarious forgiveness. It's an abdication of moral responsibility. I think the idea of taking no thought for the morrow, of the instructions are, abandon your family. If you don't, you are one who hates me. Give up investment, thrift, any thought of a future, children, architecture, anything of the sort. Forget all that and follow me is moral only on one condition, and it's the condition I referred to before, that the world is about to come to an end, and that only those who stick by me, a familiar trope from deluded prophets throughout the ages, are going to get out of it. Again, I would say a multiply wicked thing to be saying and offer to be making. We would be so much better off without this cult. We would think so much more clearly about the real moral questions that confront us. Thank you.
Given this choice and no other, would you prefer a secular or an Islamic Europe?
What, my dear sir, makes you think it's a choice right now? Large portions of Europe are already Islamic. I mean, how would I adjust the European continent? I have no opinion. Why should I judge the European continent? As far as I can tell, having conducted a relationship with the Arab community for more than 11 years, I have no objections to Muslims in Europe.
Oh, David, do you mind if I breach convention to one degree and say why I think you could have answered that better?
Sure.
I mean, because it implied in your view that atheism poisons everything. Is it not, and I think this was the intention of the question anyway, that I'd be better off as a Wahhabi than I would as an atheist? Now, what Larry, I think, was trying to ask you is, do you seriously maintain any such thing?
You mean with respect to Europe?
Would Europe be better religious but Islamic or without God? Is, I think, the question, is it not? And I miniaturized it for myself. I invite you to take another run at it.
Yeah.
In fact, I strongly advise it, and you can have it out of my time.
This is a forced choice. Which would you prefer? An Islamic Europe? Would you like to live in an Islamic Europe, or would you do live in Europe, or would you prefer to live in a secular?
The trouble is the question has no provocative urgency for me. It has none whatsoever. I mean, it's like asking which I would prefer to be dressed in gold or in silver. It's not a living issue.
Right. Christopher, do you believe that all, and this is, by the way, is your last question, so at the end, take an extra minute or so to summarize your arguments and to make a final statement. Do you believe that all religions are equally poisonous?
My beloved younger daughter today became a senior at Sidwell Friends School in Washington. So at least I know that she's under serious police guard during the day. And as its name implies, there's a Quaker Foundation where, if she hasn't understood the story of Frederick Douglass and Elizabeth Cady Stanton and many other people by now, it's not for want of trying. And so would I not be fatuous or demagogic if I said that Quakerism to me is exactly the same as Wahhabism or the Twelver Shiite theory of the Velayat Faqih, the Khomeini theory? Of course not. But religions, different ones, do take their turn at bat, I think, to show how dangerous the religious proposition is. Quakers, for example, expelled from their ranks those who supported the American Revolution because they thought that they'd taken an oath of loyalty and that it was all other principles, and there had to be another Quaker meeting set up in Philadelphia of people who'd been chucked out. Betsy, an Episcopalian, and so on. The more you look at some of these supposedly innocuous sects, you realize they're only innocuous because they've become so by having their fangs drawn by civil society over the years. When Jefferson says to the Baptists of Danbury, Connecticut, don't worry, you live in a country that has a wall of separation between church and state, and it will ever be thus. Who can tell me? Actually, I've got a better chance in Birmingham of getting someone. Who were the Baptists of Danbury, Connecticut afraid of? Oh, come on. Oh, come on. The Congregationalists won in Alabama. The Congregationalists of Danbury, Connecticut thought that Baptists shouldn't be citizens. So, I've only got a minute. So, just as I would have said 50 years ago, the Catholic Church is by far the most dangerous because of its open, soggy, disgusting, rotten alliance with fascism, which it didn't get over till well after the Second World War. Obviously now Islam, which had been going through a long period of latency, is by far the most dangerous religion. But yes, they all make the same mistake. They all take the only real faculty we have that distinguishes us from other primates and from other animals, the faculty of reason and the willingness to take any risk that reason demands of us, and they replace that with the idea that faith is a virtue. If I could change just one thing, it would be to dissociate the idea of faith from virtue, now and for good, and to expose it for what it is, a servile weakness, a refuge in cowardice, and a willingness to follow, with credulity, people who are in the highest degree unscrupulous. Thank you.
The idea of someone else paying for your sins sounds comforting, but it destroys personal responsibility. In real life, justice doesn't work like that. You can't commit a crime and have an innocent person take the punishment. That would be considered completely immoral in any legal system. Christianity builds that idea into its foundation. You are told your actions don't fully belong to you anymore. They can be transferred. That weakens accountability. Even some teachings push people away from real-world responsibility. Lines like, "Take no thought for tomorrow," Matthew 6:34, discourage planning and long-term thinking. That doesn't build strong societies. It creates instability. And Hitchens' bigger point is clear. Faith replaces reason. Instead of thinking critically, people are taught that believing without evidence is a virtue.
Your final question, and at the end, you may summarize your arguments. What is one to make of the claim, or rather, what do you make of the claim that science and Christianity are in opposition to one another?
What am I to make of the claim that science and Christianity are in opposition to one another? I would need to hear the claim reticulated properly. To claim a point of opposition in general seems to me unhelpful. To claim points of opposition in particular seems to me rather more reasonable. In its largest aspect, Western science is, of course, an outgrowth of the Judeo-Christian tradition, especially to the extent, and perhaps only to the extent, that it is committed to the principle that the universe, the manifest universe, contains a latent structure that can be discovered by the intellect of man. I think this is true. I don't think this is very far from Gerard Manley Hopkins' declaration that the world is charged with the grandeur of God. They represent rather the same position in the world of thought. The world is charged with the grandeur of God, therefore it can be rationally comprehended. Please notice, this is very different from a Muslim claim. It's very different from the Islamic tradition in which God is assigned rather a capricious role. There is a reason that Muslim science, so fecund and glorious in the 10th, 11th, and 12th century, did come to an end unceremoniously. And it can be traced back to Muslim theological writings. So yes, I would say the Judeo-Christian tradition, the tradition of a revealed religion that is revealed in nature, but pointing to a supernatural order, has been a powerful influence on the development of Western science, one, by the way, recognized by virtually every significant scientist, every single one of them. What do I have next?
1 minute for closing remarks.
I certainly have no objection to repeating myself, but whether you're equally willing to hear myself repeat it, I don't know. I've offered you 3 considerations. I've listened very respectfully to what Mr. Hitchens has said, and I have found myself, as he expected, immeasurably improved. However, I have heard nothing that discourages me or dissuades me from affirming the propositions that I have affirmed. The influence of atheism, even though religions have done dreadful things, has been poisonous for at least 300 years, and especially poisonous in the 20th century. Second, atheism is a position in thought, a dogmatic position in thought, an asseveration that there is no God, has had a deforming influences on the sciences because it leaves open unanswered questions that press on the human heart. And third, that atheism inevitably, in the moral sphere, leaves unanswered the question, what obliges us? What forces us? Not what persuades us, what forces us to behave as we should. Thank you.
I want to thank both of these gentlemen for participating in this debate, and it seems appropriate at this time, now the debate is over, to say a word about Fixed Point Foundation. Fixed Point Foundation is a Christian organization, and unashamedly so, though we do seek to engage in the realm of ideas. Now, some would wonder why we would sponsor a debate like this. I mean, as a Christian organization, we have represented on the stage here. Neither of these men are Christians. Well, we think that these are questions, these are ideas that are relevant to everyone, whether you're a Christian, whether you're an atheist, agnostic, or of some other religion. Now, that said, I want to be very honest and state that our position, our sympathy certainly lie in the direction that a robust Christian influence in society is a good thing. Now, Christopher has said, and it seems appropriate to me to respond to him, that it would ruin my life if I were to learn that Jesus Christ was just a figment of my imagination and millions, indeed billions, of other people as well. To that, I must confess that he is correct. It would ruin my life. It really would, because it would suggest, from our perspective, that this life is in fact meaningless, that it's a hoax, that it's a sham. That is our perspective. Now, if you are interested, if you're interested in knowing more about Fixed Point Foundation, then certainly you can find that about us on the web. This particular debate will be aired on C-SPAN, and I'm not sure of the dates or times of that, but I think it'll be aired a number of occasions, so you can find it there, and you can certainly find it on our website as well. And we also want to welcome, somewhat belatedly, 60 Minutes, who is here, and they are doing a piece on Christopher Hitchens. So please join me in thanking these men for their participation this evening.
The church didn't build science. It fought it. Galileo was put under house arrest for supporting heliocentrism. Darwin's theory of evolution was rejected because it directly contradicted creation stories. Even today, many religious groups deny basic scientific facts like evolution and climate science. Science works because it questions everything. Religion asks you not to question the core beliefs. And the claim that atheism leaves people without moral direction doesn't make sense. Laws, ethics, and social systems already guide behavior. You don't need a God to know that harming others is wrong. Societies function because of shared rules, not divine threats. Hitchens' point stands. Faith doesn't add clarity. It fills gaps with belief instead of answers. And when someone says life has no meaning without religion, that says more about the belief than reality. Meaning is something people create, not something handed down. When you remove faith, you don't lose purpose. You gain control over it. Hitchens was fighting illness when he said all this. And he still stood firm, still challenged everything, and still didn't give in. That says a lot. So here's the question for you. Do you think belief should be based on evidence, or is faith enough on its own? Drop your answer in the comments. I want to hear where you stand, and if you made it this far, hit like and subscribe.